And good evening and welcome to tonight's Order Paper Show. Now you might have noticed we have one person, a bit of a swap out in who's joining me as one of the show's panelists for tonight. Paul, how's it going?
Oh yeah, I'm having a very bad day of trying to detox digitally. As you can tell, I'm struggling to digitally.
Yes. Especially when you see in front of a computer. Thank you for stepping out on behalf with Laura. Now, just for those who are wondering, Laura has come down with COVID, and I did get a text message very, very early this morning to say that she couldn't make it and to sit down there and set up other ones. There was a planned 3 p.m. show for today, but as a result of what happened, that was aborted because I cannot picture myself dealing with no panelists. It will feel very awkward and weird. Now, we're also meant to be having Frosty tuning up, but he did sit there and mention that he is on the latest side for tonight, as there's just a few things getting there. So when his face magically appears, it will definitely, we can sit there and kick off, and maybe he will have to sit there and play catch-up mode like the kid who turned up late to class.
Make him do lines, and I do hope Laura's feeling better soon.
I think she'll get through it. But yeah, it's unfortunate, just like the timing of it. And I wonder if Biggie has been booted out of the room.
Well, there's no good time to get sick.
Yeah. So tonight's show, the 2 bills will be coming as the Oversight of Aotearoa Tamariki Systems Legislation Amendment Bill, and also the Employment Disclosures, what's it called? Employment Disclosures, Employee Remuneration Amendment Bill. The Oversight of Aotearoa Tamariki Systems Legislation Amendment Bill. The purpose this is a single broad policy of this omnibus bill to enhance the oversight and monitoring of Aotearoa Tamariki systems by making key structural changes to independent child monitors and the Children and Young People's Commission.
Sounds complicated, but this government doing anything with Oranga Tamariki is going to end up in probably a very bad place.
Yes. So let's kick off with the Honourable Louise Upston. Some of you might want the Honourable title dropped, who will kick off with tonight's first speech, opening explaining what the bill is.
Under the authority of the House and can be found on the parliamentary website.
Mr Speaker, I move that the Oversight of the Oranga Tamariki System Legislation Amendment Bill be now read a first time. I nominate the Social Services and Community Committee to consider the bill, and at the appropriate time I intend to move that the bill be reported to the House by the 6th of March 2025. Mr Speaker, the purpose of the bill is to strengthen the independent monitoring of the Oranga Tamariki system, or children's system, and make it crystal clear to children and young people who their advocate is. The Oranga Tamariki system is defined as the system that is responsible for providing services and support to children, young people and their families or whānau under or in connection with the Oranga Tamariki Act or the Children's and Young Persons Wellbeing Act of 1989. The oversight of the children's system was changed significantly in 2022 and 2 acts were introduced. The Oversight of the Oranga Tamariki System Act 22 established the Independent Children's Monitor as the independent monitoring agency of the children's system and appointed the Ombudsman to investigate issues in the system as well as handle complaints about the system. At the same time, the Children and Young Persons Commission Act 22 established the Children and Young Persons Commission, equipping it with the functions, duties and powers to protect and advocate for the interests and wellbeing of all children and young people who have interacted with the system. This bill, Mr Speaker, intends to amend the Oversight of the Oranga Tamariki System Act and Children and Young Persons Commission Act, specifically to transition the Monitor from a departmental agency to an independent Crown entity with a small multi-member board, and the Children and Young Persons Commission from an independent Crown entity led by a multi-member board to an independent Crown entity led by a single Children's Commissioner. Feedback on the 22 Oversight of Oranga Tamariki System and Children and Young Persons Commission Bill raised concern about the monitor's independence, suggesting that a departmental agency might not be as fully independent of political considerations. This bill responds to those concerns that were raised by many submitters and will change the institutional arrangements of the monitor to an independent Crown entity to further strengthen its independence. This bill requires experience and knowledge from the monitor's board members to ensure that they possess the necessary skills and knowledge, such as quality assurance, data governance, and a strong understanding of the care system to assume these important roles. Feedback on the 22 Oversight of the Oranga Tamariki System and Children and Young Persons Commission Bill also emphasised the idea of having a single individual acting in the role of advocate, in other words, having a clear Children's Commissioner. This bill addresses this concern, again, that was raised by multiple submitters, very strong community views, and so this bill addresses a concern by disestablishing the current 5-member board model of the Commission and returning to a single Children's Commissioner. The value in having 2 distinct roles and voices in the oversight system cannot be overstated. The Independent Children's Monitor plays the role of neutral observer and reporter, and the Children's Commissioner has a separate role in amplifying the concerns and advocating strongly on behalf of children, young people and their whānau. Keeping the monitor separate from the advocate role of the Children's Commissioner will help ensure that their work continues to be impartial, which of course is vital to its role. However, I acknowledge that the Monitor, the Children's Commissioner and the Ombudsman are only part of the oversight of the children's system and need to work collectively to give effect to their separate but complementary functions. For the Monitor to perform its role well and to influence change, it needs to have the trust of communities and to be a trusted advisor to government, independent of any specific policy positions or considerations. Equally, to be an effective advocate, the Children's Commissioner often needs to take and promote a strong position, sometimes publicly. The Children's Commissioner must be able to do this freely and without fear of impacting the work of the Monitor. The Monitor and the Commission, along with the Ombudsman, are also working closely together to ensure the monitoring, advocacy and complaints roles are properly joined up to best support our most vulnerable children and young people. These agencies are taking a no wrong door approach, which means regardless of which agency is approached, either for complaint or for feedback, they will direct people to the right place. The bill also covers consequential and transitional arrangements for the Monitor and the Commission to ensure smooth transition of functions. I'm sure, Mr Speaker, every member of the House will recognise how important the work is both of the Monitor and of the Commission. So to minimise any disruption to both entities' work, the bill provides that the Chief Executive of the Monitor will continue as Chief Executive of the new independent Crown entity from 1 year from commencement date. And similarly, the current Chief Children's Commissioner will also become the Children's Commissioner for 1 year from the commencement date of the bill. Continuing the current Chief Children's Commissioner's role will help to build on the visibility of the position and strengthen their existing relationships with children and young people, which of course is critical to the success of their role. The timing of our changes addresses and complements some of the findings that were provided in the final report of the abuse in care that was the Royal Commission of Inquiry. A key finding of the report is that the state failed to ensure that there was robust independent oversight and monitoring of all care settings that interacted effectively for people at risk, and that robust and independent oversight and monitoring is a critical way of ensuring that care providers fulfil their duties to people in care, including detecting when they are not complying with applicable laws, regulations, policies, or providing safe and quality care. This view was shared by many, including the Human Rights Commission, which in its final report noted, and I quote, "Independence is crucial for the Independent Children's Monitor to achieve its objectives of providing objective and impartial monitoring of the Oranga Tamariki system. A monitor that is not completely independent of government will struggle to gain the public trust and confidence that is necessary to address the failures of abuse in care," end quote. Mr Speaker, many people will not be surprised by these two simple but very important changes to the oversight of the Oranga Tamariki system. There was very clear feedback when the 22 legislation was introduced and open for submissions, so we are resolving two of the issues that were very strongly submitted on at the time. Mr Speaker, overall this bill strengthens the independent monitoring of the Oranga Tamariki children's system and makes it crystal clear to children and young people who their advocate is. Mr Speaker, I commend this bill to the House.
Now, just before we sit there and get to speak about the bill, so I've just posted. Okay, I'm taking over that comment. All late fees payable to 38-9023-0800 167-00. It's in the ballot productions if you want to send any late fees our way.
You spelt it prosecutions? were you thinking of what's going to end up happening to the government when they go, look, we want to make sure that we don't repeat the same mistakes from the abuse and state care report, but we're going to allow corporal punishment for those kids that are in the boot camp?
This is what happens when F and T are next door to each other on the keyboard.
Subliminal.
Make sure you put a D instead of S, otherwise the banking system might not let it go through. So, what's the basis of the bill have you got from it? Because I'm none of the wiser, to be honest.
It actually sounds to me a little bit like a shell game. And you know, we're just going to move things around and you don't need to look at where things are going, but things are being moved around so we can say we made progress. And you know, Labour bad, because this is what Labour did. So we're just swapping things around because Labour bad.
You're very quiet.
You're
even more quiet with a microphone that's not working.
If it helps, you could do it all in interpretive dance.
You could do sign language. No, you're on the screen. There's no such thing called backstage or restream, because if you're backstage, it's that. And when you're on stream, it's that. So maybe that's your microphone. You've set it and told it to mute, because on our end it says you're going through. Okay, it looks like while we're waiting from there, let's see what Willa Jean Prime's got to sit there and say in response while Frosty sorts out his microphone.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, for the opportunity to take a call on this bill. Can I start by saying that we support this bill going to select committee, but that is qualified support. I want to address the two main proposals in the legislation. When Labour was in government, we started work on strengthening oversight of the children's system. The BT report highlighted how inadequate our system of oversight was, and Labour acted quickly to make it stronger. We established the independent child monitor, and we enabled the Ombudsman to provide accessible and timely complaint and investigation processes for children and young people, and we boosted the diversity and advocacy powers through the Children and Young People's Commission. At the time, we also reduced the review period to 3 years instead of 5 to enable the review to take into account recommendations from the Royal Commission into Abuse and State Care. I would like to take this opportunity to commend the work of the Independent Child Monitor and the 5 Children's Commissioners in their tireless advocacy for children and young people, and the work of the Ombudsman. But, Mr. Speaker, I find it really difficult to be speaking on this proposed changes to legislation to improve the oversight of the children's system when we have just had question time and serious questions being asked about safeguarding in the children's system to ensure when the ability to use force on children in custody is being discussed and debated and decided by Cabinet. I find it difficult to believe what the government is saying in terms of their desire to ensure that we have the best oversight and protection for our most vulnerable children, and that we respect their advocate and the voices, when the Minister for Children did not even bother to consult the Children's Commissioner on the proposed changes in the youth justice policy space. Mr. Speaker, we support any changes that will build the trust that has been spoken about in terms of the independence of the Independent Children's Monitor. But in terms of the changes to the Children's Commission, we do not support the reduction down to one single commissioner. When we established the Children and Young People's Commission, we put in place a model with 5 commissioners, led by the Chief Children's Commissioner. And we did this to get wider and more diverse representation on the Commission, to enable more robust advocacy for children and young people. And because of that, we believe that we need diverse representation for children and young people, and we don't support those proposed changes in this legislation. Stakeholders have now had time to see in action the changes that Labour made, and we believe it is important to hear from stakeholders on this and their views on the current system and what this bill proposes. So we look forward to the Select Committee process, where submitters will be able to give us their views on the increase of children's commissioners to provide that diversity. Mr. Speaker, over the past year, this government has made significant cuts to Oranga Tamariki frontline services. They've introduced boot camps. They are repealing Section 7AA. And we have seen the benefits of having a robust system of oversight for our children, holding the government to account on behalf of children and young people. So, to reiterate, we support this legislation going to Select Committee. We support any enhancements to the independence of the Independent Children's Monitor. We do not support the reduction of commissioners for mana mokopuna. We look forward to the Select Committee process, and we challenge the government in all that it is doing across the children's system to ensure that we have the best safeguards and monitoring in place that is respected that is sought out, that is consulted at every opportunity, so that we can ensure we are doing everything that we can possibly do to ensure we do not have a repeat of the abuse and care we had in the past. Kia ora, Mr. Speaker.
And I hope that's not going to be introduced in the thing. Whack the kid now, ask if the kid did anything wrong later, because that's issuing the punishment before finding out if the punishment is justified.
Oh, who knows with this system? I mean, it is a very interesting thing to see the governments that they're going, oh, you know, children are a big concern. We've got to look after them. And we know the reports that are coming out now about the boot camps and the use of corporal punishment there. But there was a story that came out this week saying there was another 540 people who have lost their jobs in Oranga, Tamariki. We're hearing stories all the time of services being cut because funding's being cut. And we saw what happened around Section 7AA when they took that out, which had provable outcomes that were really easy to see. They clearly are sitting there going, we want to say the right words, but the actions don't match those words. And if we move everything around, maybe nobody will notice. And to be fair, they don't have a really good track record when it comes to appointing commissioners. If you just have a look at the Human Rights Commissioner and the Race Relations Commissioner, they are really bad choices, and the process is incredibly dodgy on how they got into that position. So I think it's got the stink of New Zealand First Act and National at the moment, because their processes are clearly not up for par, and we're seeing real problems pop up with them.
Yeah, I think we might find a few better people sitting at the local dole office who have actually ended up getting the roles.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, you know, maybe you might need to have some unknown nobody who's never who's on the unemployment benefit, because they might actually have a bit of more compassion.
But at least understand the systems a lot better.
Yeah. Well, they understand WINS a lot better than probably some of the staff.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, let's get to Kuhurangi Carter. We'll get that, and while we're still waiting
Thank you,
for
Mr. Speaker.
to come back.
I rise today on behalf of the Green Party of Aotearoa in support of the Oversight of Oranga Tamariki System Legislation Amendment Bill. As my former colleagues and the Minister have previously outlined, this omnibus bill amends two key acts: the Oversight of Oranga Tamariki System Act 2022 and the Children and Young Persons Commission Act 2022. Specifically, it makes changes to the legislative status of the two core agencies in the Children's Oversight and Monitoring System. It changes Te Aotearoa Tamariki from a departmental agency within the Education Review Office to an independent Crown entity. Secondly, it reverts Mana Mokopuna, Children and Young People's Commission, to a single commissioner model. Mr. Speaker, in supporting this bill, I want to acknowledge its origins. Changes to the Children's Oversight and Monitoring System were introduced in 2022. The Greens previously opposed changes that separated the children's advocacy and monitoring functions for two main reasons: as it risked weakening both roles and compromised the independence of the Children's Oversight System, and having the monitor as a departmental agency within the Education Review Office risked the autonomy of the monitor itself. Mr. Speaker, the Greens are pleased to see the changes in this bill addressing these concerns now. The Children's Monitor will have greater independence by being established as a fully standalone ICE. Mr. Speaker, I want to acknowledge the incredible mahi of the Monitor and those working within it. These kaimahi uplift the stories, experience and reality of Tamariki across the motu. They do this daily while respecting the mana and dignity of Tamariki and the experiences they seek to uplift. I want to acknowledge the integral mahi of the Monitor since its inception in 2022. There have been many reports published by the Monitor, from Tamariki's access to primary health care to Tamariki's experience of returning home after state care. But, Mr. Speaker, the report that sticks with me the most is towards a stronger safety net to prevent abuse of children, which centres on the tragic case of Malachi Schubeck's death and the state's repeated failings. It concluded that Tamariki are no safer in New Zealand than they were at the time of Malachi's death. These incident reports are a vital part of our oversight system and make sure we care for our Tamariki by holding a mirror to the decision makers within agencies and the government so that we can make evidence-based decisions that reflect the needs of the community and centre the children. As I have said previously, the Greens support the intent of giving the Monitor further independence. However, increased independence cannot substitute for adequate funding. The Greens continue to call for sustained funding increases to ensure that the Monitor can effectively uphold decision making, continue to keep decision makers accountable. I want to acknowledge this government for listening to those on the front lines of our care system in New Zealand within this bill. Last week, I had the privilege of meeting again with Voice Whakarongo Mai and recognising the incredible mahi they do nationwide to support care experience Tamariki. And I want to share the words of Mary Lynn Huxford, National Care Experience Youth Participation Advisor, who said, quote, "Reverting to an appointed Children's Commissioner will simplify things for Tamariki. With an identifiable and reliable person there for them to turn to, I'm so pleased to finally see a government decision about the care sector being informed by those who are care experienced," end quote. This bill reflects the commitment to centring the voices of those with lived care experience in our care response, which the Greens wholeheartedly support. However, this cannot and must not stop here. The government and Crown have profoundly failed survivors of abuse and care. And next week we have this apology, and we need to make sure that we are advocating for all 138 recommendations to be implemented. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
It's a pity Frosty's internet connection is a bit all up the whack, and it seems to be quite a few of us seem to be finding out it, not just me.
It's good that everyone's being kept in the loop.
Exactly. How did you find? Was it Kahurangi's?
Yeah, I think she spoke very well to it, and I completely see where their perspective is coming from. It's quite interesting as well that this is coming so close to that apology for the Abuse and State Care Report. That's clearly a big one, a very important piece of work that's been done, and one that unfortunately feels like we're going to have to do again in 10, 20, 30 years' time with what we're seeing happen come through the system now. So I can certainly see why she's very concerned that government is not learning from its past mistakes, or it seems like it's not learning from its past mistakes, and wants to make sure that that doesn't happen. Because nobody wants to see that result happen. It's just
so would that
horrible.
Echo the quote that was said by Trevor Noah on the Australian Project? We're in the dumb era of society at the moment.
Oh, somebody told me, I can't remember where it was, it might have been on TikTok. We're in the find out era, the find out phase. There are two phases, and the second one is find out. And yeah, this last week has felt very much like the first phase where you fuck around.
So certainly, yes. Okay, let's get to the Minister for Children.
Privileged to rise on behalf of ACT in support of the oversight of the Oranga Tamariki System Legislation Amendment Bill. When I first came to Parliament, I came out of sheer frustration around, in my community, seeing and hearing issues that I knew about growing up, dealing with care myself. And my mission from day one coming into Parliament is to make a real true difference when it comes to young people in care and making sure that whilst they're in care, they're safe. And so I am grateful to the work of Honourable Louise Upston in this space, because while I was in opposition, I was firmly opposed to the changes that were made in 2022, which muddied the waters of how a young person or a person who wanted to find a way to have a voice when things were going wrong didn't know who to turn to or where to go. There cannot be gaps in our system when it comes to responding to reports of kids being in danger or kids being hurt or harmed in care. And we need to make it simple, Mr. Speaker. We need to make it a no wrong door policy so that no matter where a young person or a family member goes, they can be directed to the exact right person who can monitor for them and the exact right person who can advocate for them. I truly understand the importance of a transparent system when it comes to children in care, making sure that they are being provided with absolutely everything that they need and everything that they should have whilst in the care of Oranga Tamariki. Children in state care deserve a truly accountable system and that means having a truly independent and accountable advocate in their corner. We need to gain back the trust, Mr. Speaker. Things that are coming up now, where we're hearing stories of how children screamed and cried for help, where they approached multiple agencies, multiple people to say they were being hurt and harmed, and nothing was done. This is unacceptable, and it cannot continue. And we will do everything in our power in this government to make sure that we put measures in place through bills like this one, where young people's voices can be heard easier, they will be listened to, and their concerns will be actioned appropriately. And I have every faith that this will bring back some of that trust that has been lost in a system that is meant to protect our young people. There are many changes going on, Mr. Speaker, within not just Oranga Tamariki, but multiple agencies across government who have involvement with children in care. And we must make sure that there are appropriate people who have that independence and that ability to speak up without fear of doing so. So I truly am grateful for this bill. It's been a long time coming, Mr. Speaker. Listening to the submissions when the changes were made in 2022 were heartbreaking. It was like listening to people once again screaming out to be heard and once again being ignored. And so I hope that this legislation being put through Parliament right now shows that we are listening, that we have taken on board the submissions from the changes in 2022 and the concerns from not only young people, but organisations within the community, from multiple different areas, including Hapu and Iwi, that were concerned about oversight for their young children. And it's just to reinforce, we listened, we heard, and we're keeping our promise as a government to make those changes that not only ACT campaigned on, but alongside the Honourable Minister Upson,
The member's time
make a
has
change.
come to an end.
That looks like she was going through absolute hell to say that. You can see the fear in Karen's speech because it feels like it's very, very personal.
Absolutely, and I know she has a very personal history with being uplifted and that process, and that informs a lot of her decisions. I still find it really rich, though, when she's sitting there going, we need to listen to iwi, we need to listen to hapu and listen to the kids and see what's most important, when she was the one driving to remove Section 7AA. When you had iwi and hapu groups sitting there going, please don't do this, the results are helping our tamariki. It feels like we're going to listen to the things we want to listen to, but we'll spin it so that it sounds like we're listening to the bits that we don't want to listen to when the actions don't necessarily match the words.
Yes, totally agree with what you're saying there. Now let's go to one of your least favourite MPs.
I have so many to
I
choose
rise
from.
on behalf of New Zealand First in support of the Oversight of Oranga Tamariki System Legislation Amendment Bill. I'd like to firstly just thank the member prior to me for her heartfelt contribution and the tireless and dedicated work that she is giving to this space in the care of our children and young people. So, as already mentioned, Mr. Speaker, this is an omnibus bill with a single broad policy to enhance the oversight and the monitoring of the Oranga Tamariki system. So many of the technical things have already been mentioned, but one of the things I will speak about is whilst the Children and Young Persons Commission is now in a board model and is now being reduced to a sole position, sole commission, it will also have a deputy in order to be there in the event of any absences and to ensure that there is a steady flow of work and process. The other change is the independent monitoring, the independent child monitor, which is now an independent Crown entity. Now, one of the great things about this is that it will be governed by a board of 3 members, and they will all have expertise in the area of Oranga Tamariki, processes, systems, duty governance, and also just ensuring that, like an audit, everything is done
properly, efficiently, and the most important thing is that the intent of the bill is covered, and that is the care of our children and our young people. So in summary, the outcome of the bill is to improve the outcomes for our children and young people. It will ensure independence and also ensure that the processes are not only efficient and effective, but people are accountable, there will be independence, and with this separation between advocacy and monitoring, then it will be the beginning of the rebuilding of trust in organisations where it comes to the care and safety of our children. So I will keep it brief. New Zealand First supports the bill and I commend it to the House. Thank you.
Welcome back, Frosty.
Kia ora. Can you guys hear me now?
Yes, we can.
There we go.
Can we actually hear him, or are we still hearing what happened beforehand?
There we go. All right. We're still on the Oranga Tamariki bill, right? Yeah.
Oh, yes. We don't move that far here. Even under urgency, there are people who filibuster. I mean, Dr. Eric is one of them.
Yeah, so just to speak on that bill, right, I think, do we trust the government to actually bring in a policy to actually help children into the future? I don't think many people do. And Oranga Tamariki is such an awful organisation in the first place. So we've got, two negatives on top of that. You've got an organisation that no one trusts. You've got a government that no one trusts. And they've brought in so many bills that just people don't, it's not good for the ordinary people. So, I think this bill, if the evidence shows, it's not going to be a good one. Of course, if this bill turns out to be some sort of miracle and it's fantastic, then I'll eat my words. But I don't think that's going to be the case. I don't think that's.
Well, we can find some alphabet soup or some those alphabet cereals, so you can simulate eating your words.
Look, what I'd say to you is,
I can't be any clearer. For me, if Tanya is supporting this, Tanya who thinks that vaccines cause autism, I'm a little bit concerned.
Yeah, she's, I don't trust her. I don't trust many of the people in this government. There's a few good ministers. I'm not going to be here and say everyone is bad. And I think with Karen, this bill regarding childhood, and Oranga Tamariki is very personal to her. I just think. She's got two other parties with her. She's got National and New Zealand First, who have very different agendas, who have very different things, and you've just seen that. Not just with this bill, but bills all over the place. You've got three different directions of where three different groups of people want things to go down, and I feel unfortunately this bill will be suffering to that.
Yes, I'm very intrigued what Gary Childs is writing in the chat regarding questions to ministers. And anyone who knows Gary Childs' attendance rate to Parliament probably very much surpasses many MPs in there, probably near... I do know that in 2022, I think it is, Gary, type it if it's wrong, but the attendance rate was more frequent than Jacinta Ardern. And if anyone knows it, it's the guy who wears the cannabis suit. Yeah, I've known Gary for a few years.
Yeah.
So, yeah. Okay, so let's kick off to see what's our next MP.
Tēnā hoki koe, tēnā koe e te māngai, a tēnā tātou katoa e te whare. It's probably less of a pleasure and more of a duty to stand and bring a particular angle to this discussion and to this bill. To say that Pāti Māori, we'll support it to Select Committee with the conditions which I'm going to express in my kōrero today, Mr. Speaker. So, having been a social worker and then a care and protection social worker in the time in which the Children and Young Persons and Their Families Act came to be. So, I've got some insight both clinically, culturally and technically in terms of how these bills and pieces of legislation and law come into action and don't always hit the mark, unfortunately, when it's on the ground. So so that's a bit of the backdrop for my discussion. Weighing heavily on our collective Māori consciousness is the well-being of our mokopuna Māori. So it concerns me that 80% of children, all children abused in state care institutions are Tamariki Māori. The time for action must be now, yet the actions we see from the coalition government tell a different story. This bill intends to improve oversight and monitoring of Oranga Tamariki, and we've heard all the technical bits, how that's described, making structural changes to the Independent Children's Monitor. If government is truly committed to structural changes, and it is actually sincere about the care and protection of Takapuna Māori, this seems to me tinkering at the edges yet again. This bill, this idea, this insight behind it all. And here's part of why I'm talking like this. So there's the tinkering on the edges, but then there's the 7AA deal, which ironically, if this is about monitoring and taking care of and keeping an eye on all New Zealand mokopuna children, right? Yet to take away, to dismantle a cultural paradigm, a clinical paradigm under 7AA, which is now dismissed. It's off the books. We will treat you just like any other children, and any other child, any other New Zealander. You see, the difficulty that we have as a party with that is that, again, it does not at all really deal with structural change in any real significant way, Mr. Speaker. And so we want this to go to Select Committee. We want to listen to the stories that are bound to come through. But again, it just feels another piece of tinkering on the edges, and over here dismantling of Section 7AA, tinkering on the edges and reintroducing boot camps, tinkering on the edges and then coming back to the potential abuse in custody with a military-style model. Why do I know this? Because my memory working in the field tells me this. Despite the reassurances or the comments from the Minister, I'm not confident at all, and many of us are not. And on the 19th, I think we'll get to see that a little bit more closely outside on the grounds. Seeking to improve oversight and monitoring of Oranga Tamariki through the re-establishment of an independent children's monitoring board is a minor structural improvement. The independent authority would see the return of Tamariki and mokopuna Māori. So, coming to what we would replace it with, or we would ask the House to consider, is our mokopuna Māori authority. This independent authority would see the return of Tamariki and mokopuna Māori from state care back into the rightful care of te iwi Māori. And I heard the Minister refer to as Section 396. Again, an attempt back in the 1989, 1990s, I used to approve 396s. I think over the whole time I was in the department, I maybe did 3 or 4. The idea is good, but the implementation and the practice is hopeless. And I'm interested to see whether that's going to be any different this time. I fear it won't. The mokopuna authority would both assert and protect the rights of our people promised in Te Hakaputunga and Te Titio Waitangi. It will be the primary national agency that prioritises whakapapa because whānau do know what's best for their own. Whānau order is a perfect expression of that. Whānau order is by Māori, for Māori, and I see I've run out of time. What a shame. Tēnā tātou.
Joseph Mooney.
Well, it's interesting to hear some insight knowledge from a then social worker who's worked under the multiple different acts, now an MP.
I think it's very interesting that there's only one type of boot camp. She makes a very good point about boot camps, but I also think, there's only one type of boot camps that have ever worked around the world, and that's the voluntary ones where people are have been chosen to go into those boot camps voluntarily. This is not that legislation. This is not where the boot camps are voluntary, and every single time a boot camp has been tried, where it's been forced, it has failed. And this isn't just around the world. This is in New Zealand. It's been tried a couple of times before this. And look at the big abuse and state care report that's come out about it, right? And this government isn't learning from the mistake. And I think they can apologise and they can say they're doing this and they can talk about it. But there's a very big difference between talking and the actions that they're going to do. And there's a very stark difference there. And I think they're confined by the coalition agreement to some extent. I think some people do want to actually move forward and move past the abuse and state care. I think Erica Stanford, handling the policy, I think she's a minister who's actually pretty good. You're right. But I think
I completely agree as well. She wasn't just shout when she was in opposition. She's now actually proven herself to deliver.
Yeah, and I think there's certain parties. I think I'm not sure which party it was, but that wanted boot camps back and wanted.
I think it was New Zealand First as well as National. It was a bit more than just one party.
Oh, okay.
Because it is seen as that. Well,
I'm pretty sure ACT during the election campaign came out with we'll bring it back.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it seems to be the only thing that all three parties can agree on in this coalition. But I think that there are some ministers here who would like to actually move forward, who would like to move past this boot camp era. But there are also some very conservative people in this government as well who would like to bring that back. And I think you're seeing some of the ministers who want to move forward apologising, coming out against it, but they can't really do anything because it's in the coalition agreement.
Yeah.
One of the things I found really interesting actually around all of these debates is there's a lot of talk about how it's going to impact Māori mokopuna, for example. Nobody's mentioned the fact that they want to take out mention of the treaty from the Oranga Tamariki Act, because it's one of 28 acts that the government's looking at removing any reference to our founding document from.
Yeah.
But it's a relatively new act, so it's not like it was just thrown in to go, we should do what we can to recognise it. That it would have been built in there with a reason, and no party has brought that up in this debate yet. And it will clearly impact certain groups in society more than others. So it's probably something that they should be looking at, which might be something that they nut out during the select committee process. But surprised I haven't heard about it tonight.
I think it's also been, the Treaty Principles Bill has been, looked at, and as much as I think that's very important to talk about, I think they're kind of trying to use that as a distraction for a lot of other policies that they want to strip the treaty from, and a lot of people are focused on the Principles Bill, but they've used that purposely to ensure that people aren't looking at the other ways they're trying to get rid of the treaty and other government legislation.
Yeah.
We'll go to see what Joseph Mooney's got to say.
Very much, Mr. Speaker. It's a pleasure to rise on behalf of the government side of the House, Mr. Speaker, to speak in support of the Oversight of Oranga Tamariki System Legislation Amendment Bill at its first reading. This does two things, essentially, Mr. Speaker. It ensures the independence of the Children's Monitor, and secondly, it creates a standalone Children's Commissioner. The objectives that this then delivers, Mr. Speaker, or the overall policy objective, is to improve outcomes for children and young people in New Zealand through structural changes which will enhance the visibility of the Children's Commissioner, which will become part of this process, and make a one single person who will be the visible and identifiable face for advocacy in New Zealand, which is one really key point. The second thing, Mr. Speaker, that this will do, that is a very important thing, it will strengthen the independence of the Children's Monitor. So this will take this out of where it's currently, which is currently part of the Education Review Office, and will make the Independent Children's Monitor an independent Crown entity, so separate from government. The importance of that, Mr. Speaker, is to enhance confidence in people that who wish to raise issues of concern, that this is independent from any government agency or government, and also to ensure that this Commissioner is strictly focused simply on their role, which is to ensure the well-being of New Zealand children is being adequately addressed by other government agencies. And in particular, Mr. Speaker, it's the independent monitoring of the Oranga Tamariki system, which we have heard over the last few years, just the number of challenges that has. So this, Mr. Speaker, is a very good piece of legislation that will enhance the system of monitoring that we have of the Oranga Tamariki system, and will enhance confidence that New Zealanders have in this, and I commend it to the House.
Gee, that was short, sharp and sweet.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know much about Joseph Mooney, so I just looked him up on his Wikipedia now, and it seems he is a court-appointed youth advocate. So I mean, maybe he's one of those ministers who does perhaps want to move forward.
He's not a minister.
Not a member. Sorry. Yeah.
Yeah.
This is pure speculation, but maybe he's one of those people who just want to move forward and actually help the youth, but is confined by that coalition agreement. I mean, I don't know much about him. He might have other.
He did put an amendment on the Tamariki bill it was in his name to remove Labor Day as a public holiday. In particular, of any public holiday to remove on, he was the one who put the amendment down to remove Labor Day.
Did he have any particular reason, or was it just like bad for business?
Because apparently 0.4% of the wage bill kills businesses in the country.
Oh.
Whenever anyone says public holidays kill businesses, it's 0.4% of the wage bill. And actually, I run a business that actually thrives on public holidays. So, when you're saying, oh, it's going to kill business, you're killing my income.
Chances are he is probably the most hated National Party MP from an electorate at the moment. He is the MP for Southland. That includes every feeder area into Dunedin, and every area in Southland at the moment is pissed off with the government for the decision around Dunedin Hospital. He is the face of that area as far as the National Party is concerned. I could understand him being a little bit grumpy about things.
Yeah.
Oh, let's head to Ginny Anderson, who proudly bought two or three slushies at the Gracefield School Fair on Friday.
Ginny Anderson.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. It's a pleasure to take a call on the oversight of the Oranga Tamariki System Legislation Amendment Bill. Labor supports this bill to Select Committee. In general, we support the changes of making the Children's Monitor to become an independent entity, and we recognise the benefits. This bill changes that monitor to be outside of government, and it changes the constitutional arrangements to enable that to sit aside and be independent from government. Having a clear Children's Commissioner is a good thing. Where we have reservations, Mr. Speaker, is the disestablishment of the board of 5 members. We believe that having that board provides additional diversity and a range of views if we are truly going to have children's interests and their wellbeing at heart. So that particular issue, we look forward to hearing submissions from the public on that. As noted in the initial speech, the Royal Commission has stated that there wasn't robust oversight of our children and young people in New Zealand, and we need to learn from those mistakes in the past. So we look forward to these changes bringing an increased level of transparency. And as the Minister for Children pointed out in her speech, it is really at the heart of the matter about rebuilding trust within our community, about rebuilding that trust in order for communities to be able to report, for children to be protected, and for there to be a more positive relationship going forward. I completely agree with rebuilding trust being at the heart and the necessity of the issues that underpin child welfare and child wellbeing. My problem is, Mr. Speaker, is that many of the actions this government has taken, particularly in the space of protecting the wellbeing of children, has gone to do the antithesis of that, which is to cause increased mistrust within the public. Cutting critical frontline jobs at Oranga Tamariki means that there are frontline workers who are no longer there doing that good work. Contracts for Oranga Tamariki that enable children to be kept within their whānau, to be kept out of state care. Some of those key contracts right across the country have been cut. So those things, I believe, Mr. Speaker, undermine trust in our system and undermine the ability for good reporting to take place. We've also seen the repeal of Section 7AA, which, strangely enough, when you look through the legislative statement here, it states that this bill we're talking about is consistent with the government's Treaty of Waitangi obligations, and the bill retains provisions intended to recognise and respect the Crown's responsibility to give effect to Te Reti o Waitangi. So it's great that that's still in there, Mr. Speaker. The other point I would make in relation to the rebuilding of trust and how important that is for this piece of legislation is the fact that a lot of the young people we are talking about, whether they be in state care or within their own families, have been victims of family or sexual violence. I have a deep concern that some of the cost cutting this government has done, whether it be police pulling back from family violence or whether it be no additional funding for Te Aotearoa Kura to build a network of support within our communities for family violence, that again undermines the trust and the ability for reporting to take place. And then finally, we have heard today, Mr. Speaker, that the military-style boot camps, that they will potentially now be able to have force used at them. And it is disheartening that the Prime Minister did not know that had happened in Cabinet when questioned about that in the media. That does not go to building trust. So while it is great we have a bill that's having an independent Children's Commissioner, there are a range of actions that have been taken by this government that undermine the trust that we need to build in New Zealand if we are really serious about preventing harm to our children, violence not only within state care but also within our communities. And we have a big job ahead of us to do. I look forward to the submissions, and I encourage submitters, anyone at home who's tuning in, to put their views in and make them heard loud and clear at Select Committee. It's a very important part of our democratic process that your voices are heard as part of the consideration of this legislation.
Just for what Kiwi Skirt has just mentioned in there, normally when Laura's in the show, she's in as admin, not as herself. So when she posts her comments, it shows up as it's in the ballot. So if you're in Restream at the moment, like I'm not sure Paul's logged in as admin or as guest.
I'm in as admin, I think.
Yeah, if you log in as admin, anything that sits there and types in the stream reply chat, it pretty much basically goes out under under the retrospective platforms names that we're broadcasting on. So just for that quick one on there, and just to sit there and let you know, I think Jenny did pay in cash, but that money has been banked into the bank account.
Let's go.
So, it's gone. It's been declared.
I think with this bill, she made a good point. She didn't say it, but I think this bill is like a 1 step forward, 2 step backwards. It's very good to have an independent children's commissioner because Oranga Tamariki needs more monitoring because over the disasters at the start of the years, but they're disestablishing the board. They're cutting frontline workers, even though they say they're not cutting frontline workers. And they're just giving Oranga Tamariki less accountability. It's a distraction. They're going, look at this one positive thing that we're doing with this bill by giving it an independent children's monitor, and then they're gutting the organisation itself, right? I mean, there's two paths you can go down. Is either you completely, give this organisation more accountability by strengthening the board rather than disestablishing it, strengthening the front line, giving it more funding, and strengthening the Children's Commissioner. They're not going down that path, but they're also not going down the path I think they should go down, is start a placement organisation. Oranga Tamariki has been a failure. I think there was 10 reports that have come out over the years of its complete and utter failures, and it's time for a completely new organisation entirely to help our the children in state care. And
I think one of the things that Ginny brought up that was really interesting as well is, and it happens no matter who's in power, but we hear a focus on the bill specifically, but everything is interconnected. So the police pulling back on things like domestic abuse claims so that they can, be tough on crime, so Mark Mitchell doesn't have to quit, does have an impact on those sort of things, as well as things like the costs of living. When the cost of living is really high, we see an increase in the amount of abuse that happens, both from within partnerships and towards children. So focusing on things like that. Education is the same thing. If people aren't getting a good education, if they're struggling to pay their bills, if they're sick and not able to get healthcare, all of these things feed in, and it's all one great big symbiotic relationship. So by focusing on this one thing that we're doing now, and it has one good side effect, is a very typical thing for any party when they're in Parliament or in government. But we lose the big picture sometimes, and I don't know if everybody's aware of just how big the picture can actually be sometimes.
I think, and New Zealand and Australia has some of the two most highest, domestic violence rates in the entire world. We're really, really good at that, unfortunately. And the fact that the Mark Mitchell is pulling, police away to be tough on gangs, which there have been some areas where it's been good, but I think we should actually hire more cops instead of, throwing more cops under the bus and moving them off to Australia. We should really prioritise.
We do also have a very big thing in this culture is back the abuser, bash the victim when it comes to domestic violence. As I know from the receiving end of that, and the number of times that people have mistaken the victim part as I'm the abuser.
Because it's always gone, bro, what did you do? What did you do, bro? Why did he do that to you? It's not, this clearly not.
And a lot of people go, male perpetrator, female victim. Like my DV situations were male on male. And actually, ironically, if anyone asks you, I wasn't in a relationship with these people either. That's the other thing. So while it's in there, like one of them was a stepfather, and two of them were former flatmates. And it's really, and a lot of people struggle to get their head on male, and the other part is they assume domestic violence is associated with relationship, whereas if you speak to the courts, domestic violence is classed as living in the same property.
It doesn't help that the media doesn't, help either. They don't realise that either.
Okay, well, let's show a speech from a seat warmer.
Support of the Oversight Oranga Tamariki System Legislation Amendment Bill. Mr. Speaker, the bill covers two broad areas of change. One is to strengthen independent monitoring of the Oranga Tamariki system, and the second is to strengthen advocacy for children and young people's issues. Mr. Speaker, the bill seeks to clarify the roles and responsibilities of the government agencies that are charged with overseeing New Zealand's child protection system. And it includes and must include greater advocacy and independence. Mr. Speaker, the bill will change the Independent Children's Monitor from being a departmental agency under the Education Review Office to an independent Crown entity. This is designed to ensure independent monitoring, particularly as it is separated entirely from government. The bill returns the Children and Young People's Commission into a single commissioner, taking it away from a 5-member board structure. This, in turn, will give children and young people a single and visible advocate. It ensures that those transitioning out of care know who their advocate is should there be any issues. Ultimately, Mr. Speaker, the bill is aimed at improving outcomes for children and all young people in New Zealand. I commend this bill to the House.
And you can probably gather why I call it a seat warmer. The speech was about 90 seconds long.
Yeah. And you can see it again. He's just going, oh, look at the independent minute monitor. Look at all this.
I'm reading notes.
Yeah.
I'm reading notes. Look at me. I can read notes.
Somebody handed this to me as I walked in, so I'm just going to read it as it says.
Yeah. And I don't understand why they're going on about, we're combining, these five people, this board into one person. I don't understand how that's a good thing at all. We need more voices. We need more opinions.
You need a wide range of people to sit there and do that. I mean, if we look at councils, like Kaipara District Council had like 3 Māori people who have actually been councillors in like the time of its whole existence. And the area is something like 30% population, if not higher, of Māori.
Yeah.
Paul, you might have a better idea of the numbers, but like that's an example of like what happens when you have when you have such a narrow number. Yeah.
It's like combining all the Auckland councillors into Wayne Brown, you need more than just one person running such a large organisation, or not running, but you know what I mean, right? It's
well, he has 20 councillors underneath him.
Yeah,
I mean, no other council has 20 councillors.
No other council deals with 1.7 million constituents.
Yeah.
So it makes sense. But when it comes to what's being offered on here, I noticed Laura actually mentioned no funding, and I didn't realise that there was no funding for this. But the other thing to remember is if you go from a panel down to one person, you do lose that diversity of opinion, which helps make more robust decisions. It's one of the reasons why we have councils. It's one of the reasons why Māori wards were so important, was to ensure that you...
The reason why we had a board for, was it Te Whataora? Sorry, I have to sit there and speak. Health New Zealand.
Yeah, you can't be pleasing those elite Maoris, man.
Yeah. But like that's an example of what happens when you you fire the board except for the chair and make him a commissioner.
Didn't they do that to didn't they? Yeah. You've got the health czar now.
That's what he's been nicknamed, and he is showing himself not to be quite on top of the job as he made himself out to be.
He's only working part-time.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, exactly. Part-time commissioner on two times full-time equivalent pay packets of the average wage. Or
you could get 4 practice nurses for his salary.
Does he have any connections? Because there's no way you just get that job.
Yeah, he actually used to work when he worked in Waitemata DHB in a very similar job. He worked with I want to say Chris Pink or whoever, Simon Watts. It's one of those two, I think. And their job was to strip the Waitemata DHB back as far as it could go, and we ended up with mouldy walls in Middlemore. He's got form.
Okay, let's quickly see Glenn Bennett, because his speech actually looks like it has some time attached to it.
Kia ora, Mr. Speaker. It's interesting to listen to the debate this afternoon and to hear that there seems to be support across the House, although cautious support from us here in Labour. And as I've been listening, there's the old phrase that everyone knows about, it takes a village to raise a child. But I really think sometimes you need to flip that around and consider it takes a child to remind us our responsibility to the village. And I think looking at this legislation, and I was actually a member of the Social Services and Community Committee last term. I was Deputy Chair when we went through this process. And the challenge for me then, and the challenge for me now is again, what is my responsibility to my village and for the sake of our Tamariki, of our rangatahi. And I know that it was challenging when we went through the process, and many of my colleagues from previous years and my friends in my own community did question, particularly around the 5-person board. But I came to a place, Mr. Speaker, where I did support it wholeheartedly. And the reason I did was because it was around diversity, and it was around the whole concept of you have to you often have to be able to see yourself to be able to actually reach out and to seek the help you need. And we had people like the Honourable Karen Shaw, we had people like the previous speaker and other members speaking about it's clumsy and it's difficult to, having a 5-person board as opposed to one commissioner. But my challenge back to that is you need to be able to see yourself to actually be in the space or have the ability to actually connect and actually seek out the necessary help. And I looked through back from when the first iteration of the Children's Commissioner was established in 1989, and there were 8 Children's Commissioners up until we brought this new piece of legislation in 2022. Of the 8, 2 were female. And of the 2, only 2 were Māori. And of course, funny that the 2 wahine were also Māori. And so of those 8 commissioners, that what it was. And I just think that's where we need to look very carefully about who is stepping up and representing us in this space. So my challenge as we take this and cautiously take it to the Select Committee is for us to listen carefully to the advocates, listen carefully to stakeholders around how it has actually worked in the last 2 years in terms of having the 5-member board. What was good about it, maybe what was challenging about it, but the fact that we need to be able to see ourselves in that space. So the second part I want to briefly talk about is in terms of, I guess, my role in my whole life, pretty much, particularly my adult life, in terms of working with young people and their families. And the fact, coming back to that village scenario, it's around how do we in this House always look deeply into legislation that actually is the child is at the centre of that. So that's where I have concerns, but I'm willing to commend the bill today, to go to Select Committee, to look and to listen, and to understand where we actually can best do what we can for the sake of our rangatahi, for the sake of our tamariki. And the Minister putting the bill through this afternoon, we sat in the Select Committee last term and we went through this. And as I said at the start, it was challenging, but I thought we needed to look at a different way of doing it. And so willing to move forward and for us as a Labour Party to support this bill and to really critique it, to pull it apart, but to listen carefully to our stakeholders and those engaged, particularly at the coalface of working with our rangatahi and our tamariki. So, Mr Speaker, I commend this bill to the House.
Well, that sounds like a bit more of a decent speech.
I do have a random question, though, that I just thought of. Like, I realise that they've got assigned seats and all that kind of stuff because it's Parliament. But surely, if all of the seats in front of you are empty, you'd be allowed to sit in them if nobody else is using them?
Some ministers do move forward. It's just maybe he chose not to. Yeah, no, I said that in question time. Ministers moving forward to answer questions, but
You're also meant to bunch up closer to the people who have the cameras on to make it look fuller.
Yeah.
I remember there was one particular time where Greg O'Connor said he had to sit in the House, not to do a speech, but had to sit in there, and it was the banning of gay conversion therapy bill. And he said every time Labour had a spokesperson or someone standing around him, so he had to sit there and stand there going, nodding his head the whole time. So he couldn't even sit down there and get out the laptop and do actually other things, because he had to sit down there and look like he's agreeing with the speech, which he completely agreed with, and he didn't know what he was walking himself into. But at the same time, he said it was quite awkward that it was someone always around him that was actually speaking. And
it's like trying to spot that extra who's in every movie.
Yeah, except this time it was in Parliament. This was before he became was it part of the Speaker leadership team?
Is Labour voting for or against this bill? Because I couldn't tell from his speech. He didn't seem to criticise it too much, but didn't seem to endorse it.
They're voting to send it to Select Committee. So they have a promise.
Let's see how the vote goes.
Yeah, okay. Like the treaty principle, go to Select Committee.
I commend this bill to the House.
The question is that the motion be agreed to. Those of that opinion will say aye. To the contrary, no. The ayes have it.
Oversight of Oranga Tamariki System Legislation Amendment Bill, first reading.
The question is that the Oversight of Oranga Tamariki System Legislation Amendment Bill be considered by the Social Services and Community Committee. Those of that opinion will say aye. To the contrary, no. The ayes have it. Honourable Louise Upston.
I move that the Oversight of Oranga Tamariki System Legislation Amendment Bill be reported to the House by the 6th of March 2025.
The question is that the motion be agreed to. Those of that opinion will say aye. To the contrary, no. The ayes have it. Call on Government Order of the Day number 2.
Okay, I think we've answered the question.
There you go.
Yes, yes, and this is what happens when you have a bill that passes. It goes very quickly through the whole process. There's no, process that you have to sit down there and do party votes and hear them all stand around, and you save yourself about 2 to 3 minutes of time.
Yeah, it's very rare you see, such bipartisanship in this in this house.
Where's the drama? I wanted drama, damn it.
You need the content.
Exactly.
Yes, this is
David Seymour can't be the only one giving it to me.
we show the MPs at their best as well as their worst.
Mr. Peters is on vacation somewhere. You can't get him in the house at the moment.
Well, isn't he overseas?
Oh, is he overseas at the moment, or is he still there? He wasn't causing any drama this time. So the only logical conclusion I can come to is overseas.
David?
No,
Winston. Because there's no drama.
Winston's been overseas.
Yep.
I'm not sure if he's back or not yet.
But there was no drama from his side of the house this week. They
left it all for David to basically introduce his bill.
They trade off every week. It's either David or Winston. David or Winston. They're having a boxing fight. Who could cause the most drama in the Parliament?
Yeah. They often do. You'll actually notice if you monitor the media closely, particularly with David and Winston, there will be like ups and downs because Winston's had too much, so David or one of his people have to do something ridiculous. But if you actually sit down and monitor who gets the most media coverage in this country, Luxon by a long shot first as Prime Minister, and then David Seymour gets about a quarter of all media coverage, and that's because of the Treaty Principles Bill. Because this group says we don't want it. David Seymour opposes. This other group says we don't want it. David Seymour responds. There's going to be a hikoi. David Seymour responds. He's incredibly savvy with getting his face and name all of this coverage around this bill. So it certainly ups his profile a lot, which means that Winston sits here in the corner doing his grumpy face and I need a smoke and give me a drink.
I wonder if his media coverage will die down once the Treaty Principles Bill dies off its natural death of being shot down by both parties, or if it will.
I have a feeling that it may not be shot down because David Seymour will threaten to break the coalition.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, do you think they're going to be scared by that though? Because New Zealand First has gone through, coalition breakups before. So do you think they'll squeeze to that pressure, or do you think they'll?
You have an unpopular Prime Minister who has real trouble connecting with people, who did everything he could to get into that job. He's got a very tenuous relationship with his coalition partners. Mm-hmm. There are some people, for example, who were really unhappy with National going with New Zealand First, and there are some New Zealand First members who are really unhappy with going with National or going with anybody. It is a tightrope that he's walking at the best of times. To suddenly have his whole government come to a stop and nothing work in Parliament anymore because David Seymour wants his Treaty Principles Bill it's a real risk, and there are lots of mumblings and rumblings that come out of Cabinet about David throwing tantrums if he doesn't get what he wants on other ways. So it wouldn't surprise me if there was a bit of it. Well, you're going to support it, or you could make it a conscience vote, and then that way you can say you didn't support it, but those that want to can. And there are National Party MPs who do support it.
For sure. But they also need all three parties, don't they, to get it across? Not just National. They need New Zealand First, don't they?
They just need a majority. If they could get, if they do it as a conscience vote and MPs from the Greens or Labour or Te Pāti Māori across the floor, which isn't likely, but it's a possibility. There are ways of doing it.
Yeah. For what Rajan has put on there, if he does drop below 5% at the next election, David Seymour currently holds an electorate.
Yeah, so does Brooke. I think she's thinking that as well.
It may not be an electorate at the next election.
But Tamariki will exist.
Yeah.
So, I think Brooke's got that. There's no competition there in the electorate, unfortunately. I like Brooke. I think she's decent as a minister. I don't think she's perfect, but I think she's better than a lot of the other people in the House. She shows the bar, shows the standard.
I don't think she.
I think Brooke is very much what the voters of Tamariki are after.
Yeah.
Probably the best.
That I would agree with.
Completely separate to how the voters see her. And Tamariki's a really interesting electorate in that you've got, it's Mission Bay kind of area. There's some very well-to-do individuals there who have a ton of money, but it's also very, very close to areas like Glen Innes, where you've got a bit of a borderline there where there isn't a huge amount of money, but the people who have the money are the ones that tend to go out and vote, and tend to be really friendly and give money to the MP.
Yeah. Look, I think Brooke is far less conservative than David Seymour. You see him Yeah, I think you see him, David, supporting a lot more conservative bills, whereas I think Brooke is slightly more liberal than he is, and maybe just because she's a lot younger than David is, and tends to share more liberal.
And possibly hasn't quite been brought out by Atlas.
maybe.
No, I don't buy that. I think it wouldn't surprise me if she's on their list.
Yeah. Okay, so the next bill we're going to be covering is the Employment Relations and Employee Remunerations Disclosure Bill. Now, I'll just see what the principle behind the bill is. I wonder if so this bill seeks to amend the Employment Relations Act 2000 to protect employees who discuss or disclose their remuneration. I wonder if that means if you talk to each other about your wages. So let's kick off with Camilla Bellich on this on the first reading of her members' bill.
Those of that opinion will say aye. To the contrary, no. The ayes have it. The motion is agreed. I call on members' order of the day number 4.
Employment Relations Employee Remuneration Disclosure Amendment Bill, first reading.
Camilla Bellich.
Madam Speaker, I move that the Employment Relations Employee Remuneration Disclosure Amendment Bill be now read a first time. I nominate the Education and Workforce Committee to consider the bill. Madam Speaker, it's an honour to be able to stand here and give the first reading speech on this bill, which has been a long time coming. Madam Speaker, this bill is a small step towards greater transparency in pay. The reason that this is important is that for too long in New Zealand, and indeed around the world, we've had persistent and unexplained discrimination in our pay. And that's especially so for women, and especially so for Māori and Pacific workers. And where there is discrimination, sunlight is often best disinfectant. This bill brings sunlight to pay. Being secretive about pay often fuels gender and ethnic pay gaps and can lead to discrimination. Madam Speaker, the origins of this bill arose out of a briefing that was started under the 53rd Parliament of the Education and Workforce Committee, which I was a member of. And I want to acknowledge members of that committee in the last Parliament who were really pivotal in that particular inquiry, or that particular briefing, including Maya Lubeck, who was our chair of the Education and Workforce Committee during the 53rd Parliament, and also Jan Logie, who did a lot of work in this area and worked closely with me and other members of that committee on that piece of work. Madam Speaker, the committee recommended a mandatory pay transparency regime for large businesses in New Zealand to report gender pay gaps and ethnic pay gaps within their organisations, and there was also strong support for disability pay gaps to be also reported. Another one of the recommendations from that committee was to end pay secrecy, and this is the recommendation that resulted in the bill before us today. There were some other worthy recommendations from that report, such as making pay rates mandatory on job ads, but Madam Speaker, that's perhaps another member's bill for another member's day. So what does this bill do? It does something quite simple. It allows you, and when I say you, Madam Speaker, I mean individuals in New Zealand, to talk about their own pay. It means that people can talk about their own pay without fear of discipline, without fear of action taken by their employer, regardless of what their contract says. And my hope, Madam Speaker, is that it will make taking bigger claims, like pay equity claims and equal pay claims, and it will make it easier for people to do those types of claims, which remedy larger discrimination within the employment system in New Zealand. And it means that conversations about pay can be freely held. Many people in New Zealand might not realise that if you have a clause in your contract that states that you cannot talk about your pay, even talking to your spouse or a family member will technically put you in breach of your contract. Now, that's not practical. It's also not just and not fair and not right. And in a bigger sense, it means that conversations about pay, which would lead to discrimination being addressed at an earlier stage, are not happening in New Zealand. So this bill addresses that problem. It provides a small step towards easier conversations, more transparent pay, and, I hope, less discrimination. Technically, this bill amends the Employment Relations Act 2000. It introduces the term adverse conduct for a remuneration disclosure reason. So if you disclose your own pay or disquire into someone else's pay, and you're then disadvantaged or dismissed as a result of those actions, then you can take a personal grievance under the bill. It's quite simple and it's quite fair. It is an individual's pay, and they should be able to talk to their colleagues about it if they wish, and their partner and their family. Importantly, Madam Speaker, this bill does not compel or force anyone to disclose anything about their own pay. It is just the ability for them to be able to share that information voluntarily if they want to. This is important because of our persistent pay gaps in New Zealand, and at the moment the Ministry for Women notes that our gender pay gap in New Zealand is 8.2%. But recently we've had another biennial report by Strategic Pay that looks at pay more widely and also includes things like bonuses, parking allowances and cars to measure the gender pay gap within not only the public sector but also the private sector. And very disappointingly, Madam Speaker, this has shown that the pay gap in the private sector has actually got wider for men and women. So this means that we need to take action. It means that we can't keep doing the same thing that we have been doing to date. And small steps like this, and voting for this bill tonight, and I would ask colleagues around the House to consider doing so, will help to address some of those inequities. All of the literature on this recognises that pay gaps are a complex problem. There isn't one specific clause or one specific reason that gender pay gaps or pay gaps, ethnicity pay gaps, disability pay gaps exist. But a complex problem requires a complex response, and one of those small steps towards addressing it can be supporting this bill. Interestingly, the study conducted by Strategic Pay also found that females were still being paid less than males for the same sized job. This is in New Zealand today. Quite shocking for us to be still facing that. So in relation to people being disciplined for discussing their pay, some people may wonder if this is an issue in New Zealand, and it is. There have been a number of cases which I've been able to find. One was a case called Carr and Baker's Magnum Limited. In this particular case, this particular worker was off work on ACC. He then showed his payslip to another worker and then was called up and reprimanded by his employer for doing so. It wasn't directly as a result, well, it's not clear that it was directly as a result of that interaction that his employment ended, but that was the result. So you can see that there is evidence that this occurs in New Zealand. Additionally, the Privacy Commissioner has the following advice on their website, essentially it's a matter of employment law. It's not something covered by the Privacy Act, and it actually says to people if they want to look at discussing their own pay, they should actually get legal advice on that. And that's not the situation we want, Madam Speaker. We want people to be able to talk about their pay and be able to recognise when there's discrepancies in pay without having to get legal advice. A conversation between colleagues should not depend on getting legal advice to be able to talk about something so simple. So that's what this bill would do. Other countries have done this. This is not an unusual type of law to have. Australia has it as part of their Fair Work legislation. Ontario in Canada has a law which prohibits employers from taking reprisals against employees. The United Kingdom has a law banning reprisals for discussing pay if it's about discovering discrimination. 19 states in the United States have this particular prohibition, and the European Union also banned pay secrecy clauses from the 6th of June 2023. It also has support among experts. A very well-known employment lawyer, Susan Hornsby Gallup, wrote in March 2024 that salary concealment frequently helps only the most skilled employees in negotiation, and pay transparency, on the other hand, requires that each person's compensation be reasonable in light of all the factors. So you can see, Madam Speaker, that this is a needed bill. It's not a bill that is going to fix the fact that we do have gender pay gaps or ethnicity pay gaps or disability pay gaps in New Zealand, but is a strong signal towards continued work and will help with the other laws which remedy discrimination in work. In closing, Madam Speaker, this first reading, I want to acknowledge the work done by the Human Rights Commission, specifically the Pacific Pay Gap Inquiry. There's a lot more information that I could read from this, including a lot of Pacific workers who reflect on working their entire working life on the minimum wage and not feeling that they could ask about their colleagues' pay. So I want to acknowledge especially the outgoing EEO Commissioner, Zuamali Karanina-Sumio. I also want to acknowledge her for her advocacy and her particular strength in advocating for the Pacific pay gap to be addressed, and I hope that this bill is one small step. I also want to acknowledge Darwin Stewart and Mind the Gap for their advocacy and support of this bill, and all of the CCU and the Council of Trade Unions for their work in trying to close the gender pay gaps and their work towards pay transparency. Madam Speaker, this is a small bill, but it provides a stepping stone towards further work, which I hope, for the sake of my daughters, this House decides to take.
Very interesting.
Yeah, I don't see any problems with that bill.
I've actually been in a situation where I seek legal advice and I was hit up about it saying you're not allowed to discuss pay rates. And I go, so how am I meant to receive legal advice? And that really opened up a can of worms. So what am I meant to do? Oh, hi, I want to receive legal advice, but I can't give you the information so you can give me an accurate advice. You know, and if I told that to the community law officer, she would have responded with the words of, what's it called? Your employer can't do that.
Yeah, and the whole reason for it is because there are some times where they pay people different rates for the same job and they want to get away with it. If you want to make sure that everybody's getting equitable pay rates for doing the same job, then that discussion is the way that you do it. I'm really worried that Joe over there is going to talk to Michelle and Michelle's going to find out that she doesn't get paid as much. Well, the way to fix that is to pay Michelle the same as Joe. It's really basic stuff that feels like it should have been taken care of years ago, and it kind of makes sense that it doesn't. I'm just wondering whether or not we're going to get like Cameron Brewer complaining about, I don't know, how it upsets business owners and annoys them. I actually saw Cameron yesterday at the mall and I avoided him like plague.
Oh, you avoided him? You don't want to have a conversation?
He was there with his kid, and I thought, no, that's not a fair thing to do.
Okay, yeah, no, that's fair enough. That's fair enough. I think, has National Act or New Zealand First, had announced anything, any opposition or any?
We can go through these speeches. I can tell you it did pass first reading.
Oh, okay. I suspect ACT will be against it because they're.
Oh, we will.
Okay, I won't predict the future here. Let's go through it.
Katie Nimmin.
Look, this is helpfully a very simple bill, and I'll cut to the chase. We are going to support this to select committee. But there's some really interesting things that I'd like to talk to about this. I have been an employee in private sector, I've been an employee in the public sector, and I've been an employer. And there are so many different circumstances where this plays out both negatively and potentially positively. And so for that reason, I am really interested to see where this goes in terms of public response at select committee. One of the points is there are a lot of people out there that have been brought up to not talk about money. It's one of those things. You don't talk about politics, religion and money in some people's upbringings. And so it goes against people's grain to have those conversations. And so for some, that's just taboo. And as the member opposite, and to congratulate Camilla on another member's bill out of the biscuit tin, some just have that luck to have this be coming through in the first reading and then hopefully going to select committee to be discussed. Look, some people are in a position where there is a disadvantage. They don't work in an organisation where there are grades, where the grades are really structured, they're really transparent in themselves. You know where you are on the grade, you know why you're there, you know where your steps are, and you could almost make the guess. In some organisations, that's not the case at all. In some organisations, you are sworn to secrecy, as your employment agreement might stipulate, but I have very rarely seen an organisation utilise that. But the problem is, you've got one side where you have obviously women being able to make an advance to get ahead. I've seen examples where women just don't ask for as much as men, and that's another issue we have to deal with altogether. When we're talking about the gender pay gap, women understanding their worth and asking for it is something we've really got to work on. Breaking down that stigma of actually I am worth this much, and I can aim higher, and have that sort of ambition that some of our male counterparts have. And so it's really important that we have this opportunity to hear that out and see how this might impact that opportunity. But I've also seen examples where people do use discussing their pay, and as I say, even though this isn't a legal thing to make this not allowed to be in employment terms, people do still discuss their pay as it stands, and some people do it to cause trouble. Some people do it inadvertently. They have no idea it's a term in their contract, and so it is a good opportunity for us to explore how removing that from terms and conditions in people's employment agreements can iron some of that out.
Just sorry to interrupt the member, just letting you know there's 7 minutes left. We're having awful problems with our clocks all night, but mine's fine. I'll give you a 5-minute bell and a 2-minute
Thank you very much, Madam Speaker. I had to talk for 9 minutes 46 forever, but I'm sure we'll be here too late. Look, and I think ultimately when it comes to what we want to get from the select committee process is genuinely hear the voices, because as the member intends, this is to help expose that pay gap and put the sunlight as the disinfectant, which is a really great metaphor, but just acknowledging that there would inadvertently be perverse outcomes. And in my experience, what I have seen is in organisations where there are really large skill gaps, but people don't necessarily see that in terms of their experience, in terms of their maybe it's reliability, maybe it's commitment, maybe it's all sorts of things that are the reason that somebody has an additional $1 or so an hour. Thank you very much. And so like I was saying before, our little time debacle, there are occasions where people use that as a troublemaking tool, so to create dissent, to stir the pot. And then there are some people that absolutely inadvertently and for very good intention will talk to their colleagues about what they're earning to understand whether they're getting paid what they think they're worth, and comparing and contrasting based on experience, based on skill, based on roles, and based on workload. And so, there are really two sides to this, and like I say, I'm really excited to hear from people, and do implore when we go through the select committee process and this gets opened, and I'm sure that will be in the sort of coming weeks, days or weeks, that we do get a good broad number of contributions, because we don't just want to hear from businesses, we don't just want to hear from the unions, and we don't just want to hear from women, we don't just want to hear from Pacifica, we want to hear from a really good representation of all those that will be impacted, because ultimately, at the end of the day, this is a term that it may be in people's agreements for archaic reasons, absolutely, like I acknowledged in the beginning of my contribution. It is a very old school terminology to say we don't talk about money, we don't talk about politics, we don't talk about religion, but what would happen if we did talk about it? And so I'm really interested to see that. Look, I think one of the things that we need to consider is why is it that we don't share our pay, our salary, our hourly wage? What is it that is in people's employment agreements for? And so we've seen so many organisations going towards having pay grades, having stepped approaches, having a really structured rule, having internal policies as to gender and ethnicity and those salaries, and that is a voluntary commitment from organisations. Would this see more people going towards that? Because, obviously, you're being proactive rather than reactive, waiting for someone to come to you as an employee to raise their remuneration with you in an unfair way, perhaps, in comparison to your colleagues. But it's not to take away from independent negotiation, and that's something I do want to mention. Of course, we do believe in the power of the independent employment agreement, and so there still needs to be the ability for employees and employers to negotiate. And I think that while what we will hear from contributors, and I don't want to speculate, but I'm sure there will be confidence that can still be achieved through this process. So, look, I think
from my perspective, having been employed, having been in the public sector, having been in the private sector, it really does come down to the culture of the workplace. It comes down to the structure of the remuneration. It comes down to whether you have an HR department or whether you're owner-operator. And all of these things do make every business different. And so while, sometimes having legislation that sort of makes blanket rules isn't always the best approach, I think in some cases, like I say, where we have some archaic rules and regulations that have just been in place, culture has changed, times have changed. I just hope that there won't be sort of perverse outcomes that come from this, but again, that's what we hopefully will draw out. I think we have a good amount of opportunity as a house, if there is enough support to push out to our communities, to the people we know, to really make sure their voice is heard on this, because there will be some people who might be afraid of the pressure that they might feel to share their salary or their wage with their colleagues, and what that might look in terms of competition or judgment. And so I think these are the things that we've got to consider. It will be sensitive for some people, but it'll be an amazing opportunity for others. And, I know obviously as a woman, you do have a big battle to convince people of your worth in some places and occasions, and industries, particular industries, can be very difficult. I myself have worked in the transport industry. It's a predominantly man's world. And so, there are all sorts of things that women do feel that they have to do to make themselves, on that same level, or at least feel on the same level, whether it's additional study or more hours or whatever else it might be that you feel gives you those credentials. And so, if this becomes that levelling tool, then it's a wonderful thing. And so I do really look forward to, like I said, hearing from businesses, hearing from employers in all different sectors and all different spaces, whether it's public sector or private sector, if that's something that we can achieve, and employees as well, both those on independent agreements and those on collective agreements, I'm sure, and I can't speak for collective agreements to the same that I can independent, but, I'm sure that there is a bit more understanding of what some colleagues are earning, given that those are collective in some respects. And of course, we do have some industries where they have particular rates of pay that do exist under arrangement. And so, look, I'm sure that we will iron that out in due course. Something that, as I said, as a party, we're looking forward to supporting this to Select Committee and really hearing those voices, and do hope that we get considerable contribution from the public so that we can really see how this stands up and what people's views are. And so on that, commend this bill to the House.
Well, I think that's very much sums it up from Katie Nimmin.
I'm really glad to see that they're open-minded about it. And go, look, there could be people who have problems, but there could be people who...
I wonder if Camilla went to a lot of work to try and convince at least getting it across the line for first reading. And it does feel that that's something she would do, is going through there. Like, I do know that she is going through at the moment. The wage theft bill I have read on there has been suspended until February for its next stage. And I wonder if that is to work through the things to get New Zealand First to support it at third reading.
Possibly.
I think I really appreciate her contribution there, because she's right. There's a lot of families out there, and there's a lot of people, especially in more rural conservative areas, where you just don't talk about money, you don't talk about politics, you don't talk about religion, you don't talk about these taboo subjects because it's inappropriate or for whatever reason. So I think it's very good to have these open discussions and allow a lot of people to do it. And I think there's a lot of people, it really helped to have Laura here, because it's about, a woman fighting.
She would be absolutely brilliant right now, but I do think she would be in a scaly voice situation.
Yeah. And I think, with National, right, there's always two sides to them. There's a very liberal side, and not very liberal, but there's a liberal side and there's a conservative side of National. And I think, you're seeing the liberal side in this instance winning out here. And I think they've got a good perspective on this, because, if with the liberal and the conservative side, you can understand the two perspectives there on trying to open up and trying to talk about these more taboo topics, whilst also, having these more conservative people, who might come from those backgrounds where, you might not talk about, those money and about, the religion and politics and stuff like that. So I think it's really good National supporting this bill, because it really shows the perspective that, someone might miss when something is blatantly obvious like this bill that needs to be passed through, because there is another perspective there. It's just one you might not instantly think about when hearing this bill going through.
Oh, well, let's head to Tiana Tuiono.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I rise on behalf of the Greens. I'll rise anyway if the clocks aren't working. On behalf of the Greens, to speak on the Employment Relations Employee Remuneration Disclosure Amendment Bill, and just to signal to the House that we will be supporting this bill. And it's great to hear that this bill looks like it's destined to be heard at the Select Committee, where it can have that more precise, precise looking over, which will involve submitters coming to the Select Committee to really give their perspectives on this bill. Madam Speaker, this bill amends the Employment Relations Act to ensure that employees to discuss or disclose remuneration cannot be subjected to detrimental repercussions from their employer. And I note that currently employment contracts may include terms prohibiting employees from discussing or disclosing their remuneration, tongue twisted tonight, to third parties, including other employees. Breaching this may be considered a breach of good faith or a disciplinary matter, which could subject the individual to action from their employer. I want to remind myself with the comments that have been made around the need for people to be able to share what they're getting paid, and the importance of that transparency as well. And also to acknowledge, as the member Camilla Bellich did, to the work of Saunomali I Kararina Sumio. I was actually, while the member was speaking, I actually had a copy of the Voices of Pacific Peoples Eliminating Pay Gaps, and I was at the launch of that. It was just over there in 2022, and noting that, as others have mentioned, that the gender pay gap in Aotearoa is 8.6% as of 2023, and I believe the member might have had even more up-to-date data which says that gap is getting larger. And also the ethnic pay gap is also quite large as well when you compare it to Pākehā incomes. The Pacific pay gap for men and women was 24% and 15% respectively. Asian men and women also have a pay gap of 86 and 83 cents to every dollar earned by Pākehā men. And also noting, compared with Pākehā incomes, the Māori pay gap was 19% and 12% for men and women. One of the reasons for having this inquiry, and I'm just sort of thinking back to 2022, was a lot of the Voices of Pacific Peoples have been talking about the importance of pay transparency for some time. And in this inquiry, they mentioned the Polynesian Panthers, who in the 1970s called for better working conditions and equal pay for Pacific workers. That highlights that this is not a new kaupapa. The pay gap, particularly in this example for Pacific peoples, has been a generational issue. Within this inquiry, there are a number of recommendations that I think that this House should pay attention to. For example, including implementing the recommendations of the Tripartite Working Group on Better Protections for Contractors, establishing a National Pay Equity Task Force to ensure Pacific, Māori and ethnic pay gaps are closed by 2042. I like this one, raise the minimum wage to the same level as the living wage to ensure that increases over time remain adequate to meet people's living costs. And this is where this bill comes in. And it's a recommendation from this report, and that is to urgently introduce pay transparency legislation. And now I get that this is a small step, but it is a significant step. And so that falls in line completely, I feel, with the recommendations out of the Voices for Pacific Peoples. And I look forward to supporting the member and to listening to our communities at the Select Committee, who I'm sure will be able to share with members of Parliament their particular experiences to the Select Committee. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Yep, I think the law is bang on in the chat. You know, it's about wage theft. It ties into the wage theft and how Māori and Pasifika people tend to be overworked and very much underpaid in a lot of the fields they work in, especially more labour-intensive fields.
Yeah. So, shall we get to the Easter egg?
I'm excited for this one.
Sorry.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, I would like to start by congratulating the member in charge, Camilla Bellich, for bringing this bill to the House. And I know it's always exciting when a bill is drawn for any member whose bill is drawn. And in the start, Madam Speaker, I just want to state this, that the ACT Party will not be supporting this bill. And because we don't believe that this bill is going to deliver what it says it is going to deliver. So the intention is good behind this bill. Gender pay gap is a real issue, but the mechanism that this bill uses, thinking that it is going to address that issue, it's not going to do that. So, Madam Speaker, we know that this bill will amend the Employment Relations Act 2000, and this is to protect employees if they disclose their remuneration by prohibiting the clause of not disclosing in their employment agreement. We believe, Madam Speaker, that an employment agreement is an agreement between an employer and an employee. We should not take that right away from them, what to include in the employment agreement or not to include in the employment agreement. Yes, of course, we want to see that the basic labour laws are. We have very good labour laws here in New Zealand, Madam Speaker, in our country, and we do not want too much
partnership, like the treaty. Oh my gosh!
Each and everything that happens at workplaces. Just to give two scenarios as examples here, Madam Speaker, if you look at the current scenario, I meet with a lot of people, like my other colleagues here meet with so many people on daily basis. And I know that people don't go around sharing their remuneration because it's a private matter. And this doesn't mean that each and every individual that I meet with have that prohibition clause in their employment agreement. But it's a private matter. They don't disclose it, we don't discuss it, that's totally fine. And now, Madam Speaker, if somebody reaches out to them, a colleague reaches out to them and asks for what their remuneration is, and if it is disclosed, and if it is different from the person who has asked, more than the person who has asked, that is going to create friction at workplace. Now look at the other scenario. If this bill goes through, then in that case, the employers will not be able to put this clause in the employment agreement. That means everybody will know that there is no prohibition from the employer. And a colleague goes to another colleague and asks what their remuneration is. And if they say that, no, I'm not disclosing that to you, then again, it's going to create friction amongst those colleagues, because they will ask that in good faith, that, yep, because there is no prohibition clause, they might disclose it for transparency, for reducing that discriminatory outcome that the member has talked about, and it won't result in what actually the member thinks it's going to result in. And we really think that it's the ability of the employee to negotiate on the basis of their skills what they earn, and we should not take that right away from the employee. And also, it is a mechanism for the employer to incentivize employees, those who deliver more. There might be people working at the same position, but there will be people, those who come with unique skill sets, are able to contribute more to the workplace, and the employer might want to incentivize them. So what will happen if this bill goes through? Then employers will stop incentivizing their employees on the basis of the contribution that they make, and that will take away that motivation from employees as well to work harder at their workplaces. It's very important that we support our economy, we support the productivity, because we know that the state of the economy that is left by the previous Labour government is causing
it's Labour's fault, guys.
What we should be doing is actually supporting the growth of the economy, we should be supporting increasing productivity, and we should be actually supporting that people are able to invest, and we should be creating an environment where people feel confident about investing, not just in starting a new business, but also growing their business, employing more people. And these are the things we need to do to actually help people earn more, help people reach their potential where they think that they are earning that they deserve. So, Madam Speaker, everybody's circumstances are different, skills are different, and this is a relationship between an employer and employee that should remain intact. It is a relationship of trust and respect that we should not take away by intervening. And as I said before, that of course we want to see that all agreements are upholding basic labour laws, and our labour laws are good. So, Madam Speaker, we do not support this bill. Thank you.
Now, I remember when I was working at Domino's Levin, we did a transparent incentive program. So we started off with trying to get people to sell more sides, was that you got a 10-cent bonus for every side you sold. And that worked for some that didn't. Then they introduced a new incentive, which was that the person who was the highest side bonus got an extra $20 a week. Now, it was really frustrating because for 12 weeks in a row, I was in the top 3, but I never got to number 1 because I didn't work Sundays. And including one particular week, on my own, I sold more than 2 boxes of garlic bread.
She mentioned, I also would like to touch on the fact that she mentioned that this won't fix the gender pay gap. It wasn't the best way to fix the gender pay gap. And I'd just like to hear X alternatives. What is the alternative? How do you fix it? What if this isn't the best option? What is the other option that you want to propose, or what is something else that will fix the gender pay gap?
She could do a Chloe small break and place a submission in to the committee it gets referred to. And then sit in front of it. Now, actually, I've just got to check. Is she part of that? She may actually be part of that committee, which could be technically a conflict of interest. Because I think
a conflict of interest in this government. Oh my goodness!
So shocking! So shocking. I find it really interesting as well that they, especially ACT so far, have talked about it in a black and white kind of way, whereas all the businesses that I've been involved in, I know, because I do contract work at the moment, I have legal provisions in my contracts not to discuss my pay rate because the commercial entities that I work with are beholden to a whole bunch of different people, and I have different rates for different clients, and there's a whole bunch of different factors that come into play. But if somebody asks me how much, I want to get into what you do, how much should I ask for? Then I can give them a relative guide. At the same time, if I'm working at a company and somebody's been at that company 5 years and I've just started, I don't expect to be on the same rate as them because they've had the experience, they've put the work in, they've earned the right to earn more. And I don't think there'd be many employees out there who are going, you know what, I'm brand new and I'm shit hot. I should be getting the highest pay rate that anybody in the company is getting. It just doesn't work that way. Most people are sane, except for the 8% that voted for ACT.
And then she mentioned like some very, these examples do exist, but they're not they're very, very small, very, very minor, and they don't cover mostly what this bill's about. You mentioned how this might hinder small businesses starting up.
Somebody please think of the businesses who donate to us.
Think of the small businesses. Think of the same services who run coffee carts in the world. Think about the poor customers such as Jenny Anderson who brought slushies on Friday, but Kendall Barry didn't.
Which it isn't even true. It probably incentivise more small businesses starting up, actually, because it allows people to talk and converse more, and there's actually part of a Koga community there. You can start talking, you can start feeling comfortable around other people. And then she mentioned about how it might disincentivise some workers to be more productive, or some stupid thing along those lines. Like, no, in order to have a productive workforce, you need to have a workforce that trusts each other and it works together. It's this whole thing about competition. You need more competition. Yeah. It's there might be some instances where some people might want to compete, but how can you compete if you don't know what either side is earning? If you don't know what either side is talking about? If I'm looking from a purely act perspective there, and in order to have a better workforce, a workforce that is more productive, a workforce that actually, is welcoming and actually allows more people to work there, is by talking, by being part of a community, instead of having, a robotic workforce where no one talks about anything, which is exactly what ACT wants. The second robots become available, ACT will be pushing that through the door right away. It allows more workers to come in and actually feel welcomed, because you can talk to each other. No one wants to work in a workplace where they feel uncomfortable, they feel that they cannot actually talk to their colleagues, they cannot be part of a community there, because then they'll leave to another job where they do feel comfortable, where they do feel part of a community there. It's just backwards thinking.
Okay.
Can I just respond to this before you jump on to the next one? This comment here from Dave. I've been in the same situation. I know people who have gone into a business and yet they get paid more than people who haven't been there or who have been there longer. And it's another reason why that you should be able to have these discussions about how much people get paid, so that people who have been there longer do get those kind of rewards for having put in that effort and that work and have been able to prove themselves.
Also, the other one is about speaking about this. This can also sit down there and catch out those employers who may not pay their staff the minimum wage.
Even if it's like very few people, very few companies, you still need to call them out for it, even if it's a small amount of companies, because you're only as good as the worst business, right? Your business culture. Yep, there we go.
The race to win the worst was an employee morale award. As we remember from the Fair Go Ad Awards, how often did you see the worst ad award person come and pick it up? Unless you're Lily from Big Safe Furniture who took a badge of honour, I don't think most of the time the people collected them. So now let's go from one Easter egg. We'll go to the next Easter egg from New Zealand First.
It's a pleasure to rise on behalf of New Zealand First on this Employment Relations Employee Remunerations Disclosure Amendment Bill. And I do like Members' Day. It's a great day for members to bring forward pieces of legislation. I have noticed, though, the times I've got up to speak on Members' Day, it's always a bill being put forward by Camilla Bellich. It's a bit like you're running a parallel government over there, Camilla, some sort of guerrilla outfit, a legislative machine, Camilla Bellich.
Might be more efficient.
In terms of this bill, New Zealand First always takes the employment relations legislation very seriously, and we have supported your previous bill to Select Committee. So we have had a good look at this bill, and we do think the intentions are good. However, like the previous speaker in the ACT Party, it has not crossed our threshold for support. This time you do not need our support, so it's still going through to the Select Committee, and I do congratulate you on that. I guess from our perspective, we're very much, like Pamji Palmer articulated, pay should be merit-based. This is not about equity of outcome in terms of at an individual level. I know what you're trying to address here is breaching the gender pay gap. I'm not sure that this bill does it. It potentially might, and the Select Committee might tease some of that out. But for us, we could not see this as being a major plank in that platform in terms of our response to that as a parliament. We do think there could be some unintended consequences for this. As Katie Nimmin pointed out, we don't talk about salary or pay. Talking about money is up there with politics and religion. and we've failed at most of those in this House. But there is good reason for that, and for the camaraderie of the workplace and the functioning of a workplace or an office or a farm or orchard or wherever you might be. If there's a sense that someone's maybe getting something more than you, if that sort of pervades around, it can be quite destabilising. And I think that everyone has the ability to negotiate if they don't think they're getting a fair deal. And if my wife's workplace is anything to go by, she seems to have a pretty good idea of what she's being paid compared to other people. I hope she doesn't get arrested over this. Now, I know that could be against the law. That wouldn't end well for me, but I guess what I'm trying to say is I think it's possibly a solution to something that's not really a problem. I think people do have a sense of what they're worth for their experience that they bring to a role, the merit, how they line up with others in the workplace. And if you are good at your job, even in these times of tightened financial times, that there is still a skilled shortage. So if you are good at your job, and we hear it all the time from employers that they're really screaming out for good employees. So I guess that is the basis of our position, that we just did not think that this is a solution to the problem that's setting out to address. We do believe in merit-based performance pay as opposed to just straight equity of outcome. We do worry that if an employer would like to perhaps remunerate or one worker that's doing better than others or a group of workers that are doing better than others, that might have a chilling effect on this, that they may feel that disrupting the workplace would not it's not worth disrupting the workplace and the collegiality that may exist in there. So there is a number of just that feel that this is not a solution to the problem that it's trying to fix, that it could cause unintended consequences, and as such, we will not be voting for this bill during this reading. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
They mentioned the threshold. It doesn't reach New Zealand First threshold. Is the threshold being on Reality Check Radio? Because every time they do something that's on there, New Zealand First seems to jump on board with it.
What about the platform?
Winston's favourite podcast. It's very interesting because when it comes to workers' rights and when it comes to labour issues like that, New Zealand First seems to be a bit floppity. You can they either will support or they won't. But I think you're seeing two branches of conservatism coming from the Active New Zealand First Party. ACT is a fiscally conservative party. They believe in small government and they believe in ensuring businesses have a lot more rights, for the lack of a better word. And I think New Zealand First is a culturally conservative party. Winston's been described over the years as a very old school conservative. He believes in the 1950s style of New Zealand society, and Ron Markey test to this, and I think this just shows that they don't support this bill, not necessarily because it's bad for workers' rights. I think they just don't support it because it's not something that they want to be discussed. Religion, politics, and money. Those are the three things that in a conservative household or in a conservative part of the country might not be talked about. And I think that's where New Zealand First really advocates for, and there's a lot of the voting bloc comes and votes for them for. I don't think they really care about the economic aspects for this. I think they just care because it's not doesn't necessarily. They're not a liberal party. They're not a party.
They don't want change. They want things to remain the same, the way they think the world is. And this vote very much confirms that kind of process.
Now, here's something to laugh about. You know how New Zealand First likes the trains? Will steam engines soon be back on the railway lines to move freight around instead of diesel electric locomotives? Steam engines look cool.
Yeah. Which one is more highly pollutant? Because I'm sure that's the one they'll go for. H199, known as a foul locomotive that is sitting in a museum in Featherston. And actually, they should try to get that locomotive back up and running, because apparently at the end of the year, the railway tracks will be for the first time lifted in the Remuneration train tunnel. Now, the first train to drive through the Remuneration train tunnel was H199, which is one of the 5 fell locomotives that had a section in the middle to grip to climb up the 1 in 30 incline. Not 1 in 30, 1 in 15. Just to let you know, Transmission Gully motorway is steeper at 1 in 12. I was just going to say, I thought they'd go back for steam engines so they had an excuse to dig up more coal and open more mines.
They did a foul locomotive out of there. And yes, it was quite funny that the first train to go through the Remuneration train tunnel was a foul loco. And it's an inaugural trip.
Steam engine should start taking Shane Jones out for dinner.
And he can go, Okay, now let's get to our MP for Wananeke, Reedy-Roti.
Madam Speaker, it is an absolute pleasure to take a call. This is not usually my subject or profession, but I do have the pleasure of standing and rising in this House to support yet another bill. Camilla Bellich, congratulations. And I think this is an important issue for us to talk about. And I just want to draw on a whakatauki and te iwi Māori. He wahine, he whenua, ka mate te tangata. And without women and without land, the people will perish. And that is a very pre-colonial perspective of te iwi Māori. And what we have here is, and I've just heard speeches from the ACT Party and New Zealand First in their dream world, because women are still reeling from the very toxic white masculinity of women being chattels and property. Absolutely. Do your research. Do your research. We're still reeling from that. And let's break that down. For every $1 a Pākehā man makes, a Māori woman makes 81 cents. A Pacific woman makes 79 cents. An Asian woman makes 88 cents. A Middle Eastern, Latin American, and African woman make 88 cents, as opposed to every $1 a Pākehā man makes. You haven't done your research. What world are you living in? What world are you living in? Over a lifetime, taking inflation into consideration, Māori women have earned over $400,000 less than a Pākehā man. That's the reality. I don't know what reality you're living in. Do some research, do your due diligence, so you can come here and debate the actual essence of what this bill is trying to achieve, pay parity, and not exploit women in and around jobs here in Aotearoa. This illustrates the intergenerational impact of pay discrimination on whānau. These aren't just numbers. These are families. These are Tamariki. These are Takapuna. Financial instruments are key drivers of the oppression and the colonisation of my people and other minority cultures, yet, in attention to this oppressive tool, listen, you might learn something, has enabled the greater exclusion of us from these conversations. So again, congratulations, Camilla, on this particular kaupapa. We absolutely support this kaupapa. We have many conversations with wahine heavy industries, and we're talking about ECE, we're talking about kohanga reo, that don't have the same pay parity. And we always have those conversations. How many kohanga reo have you spoken to? None. And the problem is, you profess to be the party that protects the property rights and interest and employment rights of people, and I'm absolutely, only some people, yes, only some people. And so, I am absolutely on the right legislation here, and this is absolutely the right speech, and it's absolutely the right data that needs to be expressed in this House tonight. And so, we will continue to advocate for our wahine who don't have the same opportunities, because they don't. And employers need to do better. They need to do better to ensure pay parity. They need to do better to ensure that wahine are getting the due acknowledgement of their hard work and their merit. And I heard that kōrero, based on their merit. Absolutely. Because in actual fact, they probably do it a lot better. They probably do it a lot better. No, actually, they do it a lot better. And I say, if wahine were in charge, I think the world would do a lot better. So ngā mihi nui kia koe, Camilla, ki tō pāti hoki, o tēnei pire. Because I think this is a critical bill that will be supported by Te Pāti Māori, and we will continue to stand up for those who are less fortunate and those who are discriminated against across all spheres, even in the employment arena. And so we will continue to listen to our kohanga reo kaiako, our ECE kaiako, and many of our other women in businesses that are discriminated against, and we commend this bill to the House.
And now, Mr. Alex, your comment there. Yes, I do know that. I do that myself when I'm driving Dad's truck with the coffee car behind it, because it's quicker.
Yeah, that's Pukeroa Bay, right? That's the
yes.
It's a beautiful view, and plus there's no one driving there anymore, so it's a nice scenic route. You want to take it.
I get out of Grey Street after I drop off the order to Rachel's place, and I can wait till the road completely clear. Whereas when it was State Highway 1, it was like drive a gap on my right, turn, drive, and force my way in.
Yeah, and I'm not surprised Te Pāti Māori supports it, but then again, I think I disagree with the way he relayed his argument there. But I tend to not necessarily agree with a lot of the radical comments that the two leaders of Te Pāti Māori makes. But then again, I might be the least supportive of Te Pāti Māori in this call here today. But I think I'm not surprised they support it. It's a good bill, and the only reason why the two parties aren't supporting it is just because of their strand of conservatism that they believe in. It's inherently liberal.
Selective conservatism.
I think ACT is selectively conservative for sure. I think New Zealand First is very culturally conservative, and Winston hasn't backed down on that in the last 30 years or so.
No, he hasn't. Okay, well, I think we've finished our time watching the canned speeches. I mean, looking at this, I don't know how long we could be there looking at speeches. It might be worth just moving on to our next fun section. The submissions that are coming up for this week. If you would like to put some more onto the boat club, Auckland Harbour Board, Takapuna Borough Council Empowerment Act, you've got until Wednesday the 13th in a couple of days' time. The Buildings Overseas Products and Amendment Bill closes this Thursday on the 14th. The Dairy Industry Export Licence Allocation Bill closes next Sunday. And the Budapest Convention and Related Matters Amendment Bill closes on the 28th, which I think if we watched the show last week, Chris Norton said it's a much better bill than people realise. Oh, and if you would like to sit there and help my pay packet during the week, please order from Washams.
Most important, right here.
Yeah. So, yeah, and Stacey's putting all the bill links into the chat as we speak. So you can sit down there and click on the links to do it. So that's been a very interesting night.
Yeah, one very good bill and one very, not so good bill.
Now there is, oh heck, I think I may have lost it now, but I'll find it.
It's all right.
Because I was looking to see if Panelist Palmer was on the Education and Workforce Committee. Actually, no. Where is it that they go and vote? Let's get to the voting stage. We'll do that.
Where they come from or what gender they are. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
The question is that the motion be agreed to. Those of that opinion will say aye. To the contrary, no. The ayes have it. A party vote is being called for. Please, clerk, conduct a party vote.
New Zealand National.
49 votes in favour.
New Zealand Labour.
34 votes in favour.
Green Party of Aotearoa, New Zealand. 15 votes in favour. ACT New Zealand. New Zealand First. 8 votes opposed. Te Pāti Māori.
E ona ngā pōti e tautoko.
The ayes are 104, the noes are 19. The motion is agreed.
Employment Relations Employee Remuneration Disclosure Amendment Bill, first reading.
The question is that the Employment Relations Employee Remuneration Disclosure Amendment Bill will be considered by the Education and Workforce Committee. Those of that opinion will say aye. To the contrary, no. The motion is agreed. Members, thank you for your tolerance of the clocks tonight. At least 1 or 2 out of the 4 of them are working at any one stage, and I think hopefully by tomorrow they'll be going again. The House stands adjourned until 2 p.m. tomorrow.
I think broken clocks are actually really symbolic of this government because they rise at least twice a day.
If Parliament can't even get their clocks correct in order, I don't think they can get this country in order, to be honest.
Well, I mean, the clocks are part of Jerry Brownlee's perspective in the thing there, so I think it might not be quite so bad. I think Jerry's proven himself to actually be quite a good speaker.
He's polarising. I've noticed people either love him as the speaker or either hate him as the speaker. It depends. I mean, I quite like him, but I think there's a lot of people both on the left and on the right say, "Oh, he's too laid back," or he's not.
He's a team. He's a I'd say a more laid back version of Lockwood Smith.
He's a very controversial minister. Let's not go down to the path of Lockwood Smith and what he did there.
But I mean, as a speaker, Lockwood Smith was probably one of the best speakers we had because he was also the speaker around that opened up the transparency of Parliament.
Mm-hmm. No, I mean, he's very liberal. I mean, he was neoliberal as well, but, there's the good thing about being liberal is he...
Oh, yes, but he did make a mistake on the homosexual law reform bill.
He made a lot of mistakes.
Now he's starting to go down the rabbit hole.
Yeah.
We'll be here for another hour if we go down the Lockwood Smith rabbit hole.
Yeah.
No, don't have time for that.
Yes, otherwise we might have a defamation lawsuit and might have to do like what the working group did, which was remove this show from what's it called, broadcast.
He lives in the city I live in too. Well, he works in the city I live in, at least in Palmerston North. Lockwood Smith. I mean, he had a job there. I'm not sure if he's still there, but he definitely had a job.
Okay. No, because he was the High Commissioner in the UK at one point. But I mean, we've had 2 High Commissioners since.
Yeah, I thought it was in 2021 he got the job. I'm not sure about now whether he's still working or he's retired because he's, but
Well, he'll be on an MP's retirement pay packet. I mean, he was also apparently a television host at one stage as well for a New Zealand kids game show.
Yeah, I mean, a lot of people just like the TV.
Yeah, no, I mean, well, put it this way. Jim Hickey also used to do children's TV shows before he became a weather presenter, apparently. Don't know what...
Coffee was on what now?
Yeah. So who was?
Tamariki Coffee.
Oh, along with like Jason Gunn as well, along with Carolyn Taylor, Samuel Farfoy, Chris Farfoy's brother.
Mm-hmm.
Trying to think. There was Siobhan, I can't remember her last name, but she ended up on Shortland Street. Carolyn Taylor ended up on the Edge.
It's been going for so long, you'll never be able to get through them all.
Yeah. But yes, Tamariki Coffee. Yeah, and actually, I think What Now was a part-time job while he was at university.
I don't know. I did some location work for them once when they went on tour, and it was very interesting. Some of the behaviours that you saw from the cast behind the scenes. So,
interesting in a good or bad way, or you're not going to reveal that to us?
I'm not going to reveal that on air because I don't want to get sued.
No, also, I do know he did say one thing when he was on the Chatham Islands to do one of the What Now shows and do it live. They had to sit there and have, it was 100 metres of telephone fibre optic cable or something to run up the hill to get to the satellite dish to beam it out to the TVNZ studios to link in the connection. And he said, now you can do what, he said this was like early 2000s technology, and now you can sit there and do it on cell phone signal. Yeah, he said it's so bizarre how much time has moved on. Yeah.
And quickly as well. Technology's, rapidly developed over the last 20 years, let alone the last 50.
Yes, did you grow up with a landline?
Yes, I did.
Okay, so that concept is not so foreign then, but
we don't have one anymore. But we definitely used to use a landline. Yeah.
Yeah, I know Morsham. Both his daughters, I think, have cell phones, and one of them's not even 5, but she has her own telephone number. It's so weird.
Yeah, that's after me. You're going a bit too forward. A lot of my younger siblings who are more recent have devices and stuff like that now. I never used to have that. No.
Yeah. Okay, so we will sit there and get moving. For panelists, feel free to stay for post-show after chats, and we're working on time, but we might be doing a 3-hour show next week because 2 controversial bills are going through the House.
Yeah, Principals Bill.
Really? I thought it was a quiet week ahead in Parliament. Nothing much was due to happen.
Well, it does state in there that on Tuesday the House will be starting at 11:30 a.m. for the Crown apologies to the survivor of abuse care, and at 2 p.m. they'll be having the first reading to the responding to the abuse and care legislation amendment bill. Following that, the House will adjourn for the rest of the day, and on Thursday will be the first reading of the principles of the Treaty of Waitangi bill.
Lots to look forward to.
Yes,
very exciting.
Okay, so we'll see all you guys next week. Have a good evening.
Thank you for watching the Order Paper, your express ticket to the New Zealand House of Representatives. Every episode, we unravel the complex world of legislation, debate, and democracy. From bills to select committees, we've got it all covered. From our team of political commentators who will dissect and explain what's happened so you can remain up to date on what's happened in the Aotearoa, New Zealand Parliament. To support our channel, you can become a Patreon member at patreon.com/itsinthaballot. The Order Paper podcast is brought to you by It's